Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Control Alt Deploy. My name is Alex, and I'm with my co host, Kuba. And today we have a very special guest, Bill Kirst. He is the AI ambassador and change manager at Adobe, a two-time author, a podcast host, and a U.S. Army veteran. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Alex. Dzień dobry, Kuba, and dobry dzień, Alex. Good to be here.
All right. So it's been all around the world and has seen many cool places. I believe you said you were born in Iran.
I was, yeah, 1978. People can kind of do the math and remember what was happening in 1978, 79 timeframe in Iran. Not a good time to be born as an American in Iran, but and here we are again.
Yeah, very transitional time. Well, really, really happy to have you here. So, can you tell us first off, just a bit about yourself and what is AI ambassador?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you both, and it was really great to chat with you last week and learn a little bit about your backstories and be reminded of how small the world is. Having lived in the places where you've lived, both of you, it's great to be here. A little bit about me, as you mentioned, I've had the opportunity to work in technology for um, I guess close to 25 years now. And over the course of that time, I've worked at places like IBM, Microsoft, now Adobe. As you mentioned, I was also in the US Army. And so I've worked at some large organizations and seen lots of technology deployments. And over the course of that 25 years, I've always focused on the people side, the human side of this technology and the change that happens when you introduce and unveil this technology in large organizations. And so my role presently as an AI ambassador is to take all of the craziness and the mania that's happening with AI that's being rolled out across enterprises and make it a slightly easier change for people to digest. So how to implement it in their day-to-day work, how to optimize with it, how to have honest discussions around its ethics and its implications, what it's doing to people's livelihoods, pretty much the entire spectrum. I know you both have had conversations with people on this show about all of those implications. And so very similar to what an ambassador would do in a diplomatic mission to be the liaison between two countries or two parts of the world, talk about policy, talk about impact, talk about ethics, and help people use the tools day to day. So that's kind of what I do day in and day out at Adobe. And it's a lot of the same stuff I've done for the past quarter century. It's just AI is the latest technology that seems to be compressing time and space. And that requires more attention with people who can help humans get through it. So it's a little bit about what I do.
Excellent. Well, what is the main difference between what before AI and after AI? What is how has your role changed?
I think there was a previous episode that you chatted with a gentleman, and I think you were both talking about this. It's like the goalposts are constantly moving. So I would say that the field we're playing on is changing, the goalposts are changing, the rules of the game are changing, the weather is changing. And the difference, I think, prior to when I was doing change for large ERP systems or systems of record we always had at least a point in time and we knew where there was a finish line. And you could at least tell people, hey, we're all marching to that finish line together. The change now is that every person who uses AI has an individualized experience. They get different responses back. They have different emotional resonance with it, different issues of trust and concern. And you can't take one single model of guiding people through change and drop that onto an organization and say, this will work for that, because it doesn't work for that. In fact, most of the methodologies we've used for 30, 40 years, guiding people through technology driven change, they don't work anymore.
What does?
It's a good question, Kuba. Honestly, I think what does for what I've seen is going back to the basics and understanding what the equation of trust is for people. And so, I think Alex, behind you, you have a lot of books. I was looking at, some previous episodes, and obviously you're a voracious reader. And there's some things that I think about when it comes to like psychology, neuroscience, human behavior. And at the core of what I'm seeing work, Kuba, is like this aspect of we go back into understanding how humans behave individually and then collectively. And if you understand what those things are and the tendencies of humans when given a new tool, what happens, a lot of it comes from cultural studies, a lot of it comes from psychology, anthropology, certainly psychology. So I find myself going back to those basics and really understanding what motivates people, understanding what drives their livelihood, talking about those first and foremost, and then talking about the tool. If I can get people to that place to understand that they can preserve their livelihood and learn something new, they can honor what they've learned and studied and practiced for years and still take on something new, then I can get them a little closer to what that change might look like. I think the other difference is we don't know what tomorrow will look like. And so I've stopped trying to promise that to people. I will tell them I will be with them, but I can't read the future at this point. And that seems to be working quite well right now.
Right. As humans, we're incredibly terrible at predicting the future. And so, I mean, the first response I imagine is fear, right? Is my job going to go away, or can I even learn this new thing? Is this thing, will I be expected to do 10 times more? But when this kind of big change comes around, right? A lot of people aren't emotionally ready for it. And so, um, how do you get them over the hump, I guess?
Well, I think the first thing I probably look at is understanding what's fear, what's hope, what's excitement, what's noise, right? It's trying to reduce the noise and get closer to the signal. As you said, every single human responds to change pretty much the same way initially, which is we kind of go walls up or we go to a state of like control. And that's okay. Like that's not a bad thing because that's survival. It's sort of our brain and it's our wiring to try and protect self. And when you introduce a change, it ends up being a bit of that fight or flight or freeze or fawn, different responses. If I can understand sort of where people are coming from, then I can meet them there. So my goal is not necessarily to convince them to get excited about something. It's to really try and understand where they're coming from and then slowly untangle the things that might be preventing them from taking a step towards. But the answer is not always everybody's on board. You've probably heard about early adopters, and then there's people that are kind of in the middle, then there's detractors. You need all of those people because as you all know in your world in testing, right? It's really important when we're doing testing that we have people that are not all bought into something, that we have red teams, that we have people that want to break things and say, I don't think this is going to work for everything. So we need the full spectrum of people's responses. My goal is to try and understand where they sit on that spectrum, meet them where they're at, come alongside them, and in some cases, get them to the other end of the spectrum. But in some instances, it's stay with them, knowing they're not going to budge, and that's okay. It really just depends on what the goal and the outcome we're trying to get to is.
Yeah.
It's also
Well,
why this is
so
never boring.
so like, I guess every, upper level manager in a company, right? Everyone's looking at how do we maybe not how we reduce head count, but how do we take advantage, right, of this improvement in productivity. And I lost my train of thought. But y- the so we can probably all agree that we've all been more productive. So let's say for the sake of this hypothetical, it's not really, that we're all excited.
Hmm.
But then there's the second step of we're excited that this technology is helpful or whatever, but then how do we implement it in an organization where you know, we don't yet trust the output of it, right? There's still like, the QA practice, governance. Uh, we all see all it hallucinating. So how do we figure out how to trust the machine's output? Like we have to get there somehow.
Yeah. Well, I think trust is the key word. And frankly, trust is something that for as long as we've kind of been roaming the earth, trust is really kind of this equation, this exchange between people and systems. And now we're starting to see it a little bit differently, where it's sort of put upon us as like trust the system that towards the people. And the challenge I see, Kuba, is the fact that trust has to be earned and then kept. and then re-earned and then re you know demonstrated day in and day out. And it only takes one instance to have that slip, and we've reverted back to a place, right? I think what's interesting is, yes, there are some efficiencies, there are some automations, but you are correct in saying that the output is not entirely reliable. Obviously, people have talked a lot about hallucination. I think in the work in the world that you all do and the people that you work with, you really do have to keep humans at the center for quite a bit of time, because there's elements of this technology that is essentially doing pattern seeking. And pattern seeking can do enough. It can do a decent amount, but what about the edge cases? What about the nuance? What about the context? One of the things I've seen over the course of, the time I've done this work is, as a change manager, I'm almost expected to look far and wide and see things that other people don't necessarily see, haven't been trained to look for, which is why I make a really fun sort of on the red team kind of person, or in QA, or doing user acceptance testing or production acceptance testing, because I see things, or I ask questions that other people don't, because I'm coming at it from a completely different angle. And that makes a better outcome and a better result. But that's very human. So I don't think we can eliminate the humans from all of this work. Part of my work, part of my writing, is there's a reason my second book is subtitled "Love Letters to Humanity," or a collection of love letters to humanity, because I'm essentially giving people permission to hold on to those key aspects of their livelihood that make us very uniquely human. I mean, I use these tools every day at work and in my personal life. Does it bring me some productivity? Yes. Will it replace what I do uniquely and divinely? No, never. In fact, it's actually accentuating those things I do uniquely and divinely, because it's my unique imprint on the world that I realize no system, no set of chips, no ones and zeros will ever completely replicate. So it's given me empowerment in both places, both arenas, to help people be more productive, but also hold on to their livelihood and what makes them uniquely them.
So all these people then running around like, chickens without a head uh, are they reacting to hype that, basically all jobs are done for? We're all lost. It's gonna be, either like idiocracy or something like that, where we're just all sitting around watching TV. It's probably not that far away from the truth right now, but as far as jobs and enterprise, do you think it's
I think the fear is I think the fear is rational, although it's outsized right now. So to your point around what's hype, what's noise, what's mania, look, we all know that it's kind of human nature to, if you write a headline that is mania making or manic, you're going to get more clicks and more eyes. And so part of this, I think, is the system feeding the system. But I encourage people, anytime they have that headline pop up or something that gives them that sense of scarcity, I encourage people to sort of like slow down, take a breath, and discern, like, go inward for a while, because what's happening is you're being hijacked. You're being hijacked by the noise, the headlines, the mania, and that's good because it creates more scarcity, which means then you're in the system thinking, I've got to use these tools because I'm going to fall behind or I'm going to be replaced. Look, there's no denying that some workflows will be taken from humans and done perfectly well by these tools. There's no denying that. But some of those workflows are pretty mundane and monotonous, and they should be. The other part of that question is not, hey, we've eliminated those tasks. It's, to me, it's, what are you taking the time that was previously dedicated to those tasks, and how are you giving it back to people or the organization to do something different, to do something innovative, to do something creative, to do something where we're connecting, spending more time connecting together as humans. That's the part that I don't hear people talking about, but that's the part that I am diligently focused on. Every person I sit with, and I show them, hey, here's how you can use this tool that just gave you back 6 to 10 to 15 hours a week.
Mhm.
The conversation doesn't stop there. It then goes into, what's something you've wanted to do for a long time? What's been on your list of innovation or backlog or creativity that you keep pushing to the bottom of the list week after week after week? And how do we get you to do that? But understand that that in itself is kind of an inside out revolution, for enterprises as well, because if the leaders are not prepared to allow their teams to go do those innovative, creative things with that extra time, then we've got a different problem.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of a similar. I don't know if there was such an outcry when Selenium or whatever when test automation tools came out, right? Because it wasn't a new industrial revolution basically, but still, there's this tension between automation and or industrialization, right? And how we work and our relationship with work. And if it's going to get automated, then we no longer exist. But really what you're saying is let the AI do the dishes, right? While you do art.
Yeah, good way to put it.
Mm. Yeah, actually, that's a. I would say one of the things that has changed is, referencing Selenium or any other like automation tool, is that in the past, let's say before GPT 3, really, 3.5 and on, where these systems became more and more resembling intelligence, automation required already a pretty extensive test case library to exist. And this is where I remember, as soon as like 3.0, 3.5 became prominent, one of the biggest use cases I saw for my team, my QA team at the time, was they were spending like 30% of their time on the week writing test cases, converting requirements to test cases. I thought, well, this is a fantastic opportunity to use these tools to take back some of this time. So test automation, before, you already had to have this library of test cases where the automation engineer would then convert into actual automated steps once the system was stable enough and these test cases needed to be repeated in regression tests. Now automation is now taking over the test case writing part as well. I see tools out there to do this. And so when this was first came on, this was my focus was more towards general applications. Now we're focusing on test cases for AI based applications.
Yes.
And this now creates a completely different problem, because you mentioned earlier how these are very personalized experiences between a human and these tools, right? The user in these tools. And these tools are probabilistic.
Yes.
So it's no longer a requirement to specific test. There isn't a guaranteed function nor a exactly repeatable function every time, let's say, you push the submit button on
Hmm.
some prompt. So you now have to kind of focus on automation from the start when trying to create a diversity of different test cases to run. What place is it now? Is there a change when you think of for the tester or the QA engineer? Has that shifted, in your opinion?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when I was at IBM and Microsoft, I had the opportunity to do a lot of testing. And it was always interesting because I was unexpectedly brought in to be a tester, as I mentioned, because I saw things that other people didn't. And it was always fascinating to watch, for example, test cases being written by engineers or product teams, because they were very literal, right? Click this, click
Hmm.
that, this should happen, right? It's sequential. What ended up happening when I would join those is there was all the what I call margin, what's in the margins, the things that happen outside or in between or around those transactions. And I remember having discussions with the test script writers to say, there's a big jump between step two and step three. Um, system wise, there isn't. But what happens to the end user and what they're seeing or what they're doing to get to the outcome you want, you have to include this. What I'm realizing now is that some of these tools can help us fill in a little bit of that gap. But more importantly, you can actually take tools. I think Microsoft rolled out one last year where, for example, it can just watch your screen. So you can give me an actual software, have me just do what I think I should be doing with it. It records your screen, it follows the mouse clicks, it follows all the behavior, and essentially writes a test script based on the experience that I as an end user did, right? So if that can happen, then we have reality and we have what was kind of expected, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth. That should shave off a lot of time between engineers and end users and understanding what that is. That used to take several rounds, right? User acceptance testing, back and forth. The other piece I see is, let's say, for example, between user acceptance testing and go live, there are a whole bunch of changes that are made, right? So me as a user acceptance testing person, I was using one instance, maybe it was a testing instance, and all the interface looked different. And when we go live, there's slightly new buttons, slightly new UI. Before, it used to take training teams, those are the people that are on my team, days, if not weeks, to go back and update all of the training materials to
Mhm.
reflect the new UI so that it's most optimal. Well, now we can actually take, again, screenshots or video of the new UI, say, here's what the test scripts were, here's what the training was, tell us what the delta is. And if you use things like Claude, you can say, take it even further and say, go ahead and make updates to these documents, right? The agentic part comes in. This is where people start to realize I just got 4 to 6 weeks back of time from a training team. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions, depending on how big that ERP is.
Mhm.
And so when you do apply some of these into large enterprises, you are seeing massive savings in time. But then the question always comes back to how much of it do you trust? And where do you spend that time? Where do you deploy that time back to your organization collectively?
Yes, are they saving money and cutting resources, or are they actually replacing jobs? Or are they trying to figure out what to do with this newfound time? Again, it's like, the tester, there's quite a few people that are worried that the market is no longer respecting the QA tester, like
Like
especially at
this.
the analyst level, because there's all these tools that write the test cases, can look at the screen, discover new things. So I kind of tend to disagree with that. I think that you still need a human to be discovering corner cases, and AI is now being used to expand the overall coverage, because when dealing with LLMs, you have to have a very broad, I would say extensive interaction data set with the LLM in order to understand the probability of certain outcomes. It's no longer I just do things one time, there's an output. Okay, it works. You have to do it over and over again. That's so this is it's like automation comes first. But what do you do now, if not fire the people who are now kind of sitting potentially twiddling their thumbs? What do you do with the reclaimed time? What does the tester do?
Yeah, I mean that's the question we're all facing right now because we're starting to feel this. I mean, people have been talking about it theoretically for a while. You all have seen it for a while, but I feel like we're starting to really see it come to action right now because we're seeing with the power of some of the agentic stuff, the time savings is real now. And it's not something we can just talk about theoretically. Again, I put that question back to the leaders. So let's say there's a leader of a testing team or a leader of engineers. I'm willing to believe, to your point, Alex, there's a lot of things that we've wanted to work on, the edge cases, the things that really need a delicate understanding and a depth of understanding. Maybe it's product roadmaps, maybe it's additional security, maybe it's understanding all the threat analysis that we haven't had a chance to do that we don't really want to just turn over to an automation because there's a human component to this as well. I'm willing to bet that that list of things is long. And leaders just have to be comfortable to say, we're going to take that list with all this time back and we're going to work differently. But it's going to change how your testers work. It's going to change how your QA works. It's going to change how your engineers work.
Mhm.
And that could be exciting, but it could also be fearful, right? Like Kuba said, like there's this aspect of people are like, hey, I've done it this way for this long. It's predictable. I want to do it this way. If my boss comes to me and says, we've got all this time back, let's try something new, or more, a bigger question, what's something you would work on if you could? Like, what's a wish list item? That changes the dynamic. And I think that's the other piece here is like org charts and power dynamics, they're all changing. Like work is not going to happen in sort of that org chart way anymore. If you unleash the power of agents to everybody, which is happening, we're all building our own things, we're all saving our own time, then we're putting them back into this ecosystem and other people are taking advantage of it. We should be having
Yeah.
around how are we going to work differently, right? How am I going to spend more time with Kuba and Alex in person because we've got all these things that are over here churning? What's value? What's the social contract? Right? Like I can see your head turning, Kuba. It's like there's a lot of
Well, just like, yeah, there's a ton of stuff here, and it's like there's so many competing uh competing ideas. I think, there's this bifurcation of people where, like, maybe there'll be some thumb twiddlers, but on the other side, what I'm feeling, and I imagine what a lot of people are feeling, is that I have so much power and I can do so many things that I have so much less time now because I'm doing 15,000 thing, and I'm like, I'm this close to burnout, and so I feel like that's gonna be the larger case. I mean, there's always gonna be, like, people left behind, but for most of us that just eventually get integrated into this machine, we're just going to be like, have a million tabs open, all of these things happening all at once, and just trying to keep up with these moving goalposts.
Yeah, and that again, that is a whole new paradigm, right? So what's interesting is we've talked about these things as if it's going to give us time back. Yes, and to your point, Kuba. But then if people say, "Great, now go spin up 15 more agents and let the agents do more work," what now we're struggling with is, okay, are we actually taking on more work that is just unsupervised work? And is the outcome and the output that we're still responsible for, right? The accountability is still on us. It does bring up these questions. And people are feeling this already, which is, I feel like I'm doing more. You continue to tell me I get to spend more time with my friends, but I feel like I'm doing more. And I agree. We are at this threshold. And if we ourselves don't sort of take that autonomy and that agency and discern and make decisions for ourselves individually, it's going to be done for us collectively. And the three of us are going to be having a very different discussion in a year.
Mhm.
So what do you suggest organizations do as a whole?
Well, I think they have to be honest with their people, first and foremost. And where they don't have answers and they haven't figured this out, they have to say that. I think leaders have to step up and say, here's what I'm hoping, but here's what I don't know. We've never been here before. There's no playbook for this. What
Mhm.
is trust? How do I earn that trust? How do I keep that trust? How do we do this together? There's also conversations you got to have with people around, do you want to do this? Like, if this is the direction we're going, do you want to be a part of it or not? I mean, I have conversations daily with people across the globe that say, you know what, Bill, I'm out. I'm tapping out. Like, I'm good. This is too much for me.
Yes.
And I respect them. I respect them. But those are also the people that I don't want to tap out because they're the humanists. They're the ones who are really trying to hold on to the the sanctity, right? The autonomy and the agency. But it's tough when you're literally staring down a tidal wave and everybody
Right.
get on board.
Well, you said in your book, right, humanity is not guaranteed. And so some of the QA, the things that we're not testing for are, I mean, maybe we are, but we're not talking about testing for is like testing for human dignity, like, and of course, agency and trust.
Those are
That was one.
social currencies, right? I mean, that's the other part, which I think, you know, the three of us have all lived in parts of the world where we've seen different levels of government, different types of democracy, different styles of, corruption. We've seen this. And I think it's important that people all face these changes from an individual power, like place of agency and autonomy to be able to ask the right questions. And if it doesn't feel right, chances are it's not right. But again, to your point around red teaming and QA and all that, like there's an element that I believe that people that have been doing QA and information assurance and cybersecurity and that have been doing it for a while, some of this is like it's an intuition at this point, right? The analogy I would give is almost like in a symphony or an orchestra, right? You have people who play together, and it's important that everyone, even though they're the master, the maestro of their instrument, they also have an awareness of the other instruments that are being played, right? You need that system end-to-end thinking because if you know something is off, then you can then sort of right or correct so that the entire symphony can continue. But that requires altruism, right? That requires thinking above self, not just about single, requires you thinking about the collective. And that's the part which is so tough about this work because, as Alex, you said, every time we enter into a transaction with these tools, it becomes a singular experience. And it's very
Mhm.
easy to sort of entice us and trap us into that. I encourage people to sort of pick their head up, have conversations about this like we're doing now, because it should lead to a different question. It should lead to a different conversation. You should be wondering more than you are assuming. And that's what's fascinating about the work that you all do.
Mhm. Yeah, it's gonna be a completely different world very, very soon, because if we're introducing a lot of efficiency, a lot of productivity, we're gonna have to wait and see what actually rises to the top, especially around corporations. They're built to impress upon the stakeholders, right? The shareholders, and so the shareholders want to see profit, and we're gonna have to see whether profit comes from reduced headcount or the incomplete, like significant in productivity increase from the existing and expanding headcount, right? A lot of people talk about how there's now it's a opportunity for individuals that had no ability to create a company, no ability to really create a product, to now do so by themselves with a significantly smaller uh, amount of people right involved. So, but what is actually going to be the most competitive is yet to be discovered. Is the company that is going to fire half of its people and have pretty much the same output, but like with less half the count, or is the one that's going to continue to expand and be 10x the productivity and 10x the capability of their competition, right? So that's where I'm curious to see where everything goes, because
Yeah.
well, at the same time, while we all talk about I dislike oftentimes AI, artificial intelligence, because we're all equating the LLMs to artificial intelligence, and they're nowhere close. Large language model is not artificial intelligence. We're, in my opinion, very far away from that. It might fool most people, but in reality, it's not a completely its own fundamental different type of intelligence. And so it's does what it's trained on. It does to fill in the next blank word, based on what its training data is. So, like, if we take it to coding and testing code, a lot of people, all the engineer, the developers are gone. Well, it can write code, but it can't engineer.
No,
It can't come up with something new that isn't on GitHub, that isn't somewhere like on Reddit, being
that it can
discussed.
reference.
Right. It needs to follow reference. So I don't think it can create anything novel.
Hmm.
And so we've yet to see where the profits are going to be coming out of. Is it going to be expanding the capability of the user, of the human interacting with these tools? I think I'm biased towards that as opposed to elimination of jobs and replacement, because oftentimes that perspective seems to go that AI will do your job and will take your job, but that's where it ends. And AI will never suggest a new job for you. Like,
Right.
even if it was capable of taking it, like that's all it's going to be doing. It's just going to replace you, and like you're going to be like, what do I do now? It's like, I don't care. Get out of here.
It's not worried about you. Right.
It's not worried about you. Yeah, no. So you can be now using that to figure out what is it doing. What my field in my area of expertise can I now create? Can I engineer new things? So huge change coming, huge major paradigm. The way companies are doing business, the way people are working in these companies. What do you think? What's the future outlook? The 5 or so year.
I A couple of things come to mind. One is exactly what you're saying, which is the empowerment and the possibility of solopreneurs and people that are really going to sort of step back and say, okay, with these tools, the the barrier to entry is so much significantly less. I am going to go birth this idea that I have to put my stamp on the world. And I think that's wonderful. I personally think then all of the processes and laws and bylaws, they need to catch up to allow small business owners, you guys know this, to not be throttled, right? Because there's so many loopholes you have to jump through just to be a small business owner or to be a startup. So I'm hoping that there's this burgeoning ecosystem of solopreneurs that take advantage of this. But the other part of it that you've touched on is I think what's going to be fascinating is people are going to renegotiate their social contract with organizations, and they're going to renegotiate what it means to be creative and to connect with fellow humans in a good way. I think this discussion of, artificial intelligence in whatever form it is, it's forced us to have discussions about who we are as humans. The last time we did that was COVID, right? We all stopped and we said, who are we? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to lose someone? What does it mean to be afraid of breathing, right? This
Mhm.
is this is that level discussion that we're having just through a different lens. And I'm hopeful that on the other side of this, when people say, sure, I'm willing to give this work over to an agent, I'm hopeful that people say, as a result, I'm spending my time doing these things that can never be replicated by ones and zeros or chips or silica. And I do believe that's art. I believe that's music. I believe that's writing. I believe that's reading, connecting. There's so many things that when you get down to the simplicity of what it means to be on this earth and to live a full life, I don't think it's going to be in front of these screens. I just don't. Data centers and might lose power. We're hearing about, undersea cables being cut in the Red Sea, right? Like these are all real things that are happening, and it might force us to make some really interesting decisions about what matters to us. So I'm hopeful that whatever is on the other side of this, we're still kind of holding what's near and dear to us, which is why I spend time reading philosophy and poetry and going for walks and in nature. And I encourage people, regardless of where you are on the tech spectrum, like do something creative, do something in nature, go for a walk with a colleague. You'll be surprised the things that come up in you. And that to me is what's going to paint the path forward.
What do you think is going to be your job in 5 years when humanoid robots come back or come out?
My job will be to avoid them.
Have you seen Terminator?
Yes, I have. In fact, you were mentioning Terminator was one, Idiocracy was the other, and Wall-E was the third. So people are all saying, what are the three most important movies to watch right now? And I'd say Terminator 2, Wall-E, and Idiocracy, and maybe Don't Look Up is another one,
Don't
which
look up.
was
Yeah.
which was very good. But yeah, those look, we joked about. I mean, interestingly enough, Kuba, I saw Terminator 2 in Warsaw, Poland when it came out, and I remember being, enamored with this story. And now I watched it. I watched it about a month ago, and I had chills because I was like, "We are pretty much there, folks. Like, we're not too far from that." So I encourage people to go back and watch those movies and have a different debate with what we saw as science fiction is actually like most science fiction. It's just a reminder of our humanity and the limits and the limitations we're willing to go to for what? For profit, for power, for you name it. And that's why I encourage people to go back and read the classics, read the poets, read the Russian poets, like read these people who what they put out in the world was timeless and sort of reminds us more about who we are, which I think is one of the most important investments people can make in technology today.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful insight. That's a beautiful thought. Well, on that note, Bill, really been a great pleasure
Thank you.
having you on. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Bill.
much. Yeah, yeah, fantastic discussion, and I'm sure everybody will enjoy it as much as we did.
Yeah, reach out if you have any questions. And
How ca
usually my sign of success is if I've gotten people going, I've got so many questions, and I'm like, good. That's a good sign.
so if people wanna reach out to you, how would they find you?
Yeah, so I'm wide open on LinkedIn, so you can just look me up on LinkedIn. I do a lot of writing and posting and connecting there, so feel free to drop me a note, mention that you heard this episode or what you'd like to talk about. And you can find my books are on Amazon. The podcast is called Coffee and Change. It's on every podcast platform out there. It's in season 10 right now, so would love to have you guys on to talk about what you're doing as well. And yeah, that's start there, and it's not hard to find me. I've managed the brand pretty well, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Brilliant. All right. Well, on that note, this has been another fantastic episode, Control Alt Deploy, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks.
Ship it.
Dziękuję bardzo.